just stunned by this very simple thing that always stuns me about the international reaction to Israel is, where is your empathy? Where is your damn empathy?
United Nations appointed the Islamic Republic of Iran as the Commission on the State of Women. Iran, a terrorist regime that beats, blinds, arrests, tortures, rapes, and kills female protesters, as quoted by Hillel Noor, director of UN Watch. Is it time for all democracies and moral countries to cut ties with the United Nations and start anew?
Well,
or do you think they are salvageable?
There have been lots of attempts over the years to do something about the United Nations, and there were obviously moves in the 70s, there were moves in the 2000s to form something like a union of democracies or something like this. And the problems of the United Nations remain what they've been all of our lives. The problem is that it's a forum where the world's totalitarianisms get the pretense that they're the same as the world's democracies. As you say, I mean, the Human Rights Council is one of the worst offenders, and yes, of course, you end up in these just la-la land, Alice in Wonderland situations where, as you say, the Iranian revolutionary government chairs something on the status of women, and the North Korean government chairs the one on press freedom or whatever. And I mean, I enormously admire Hillel Noor as a friend, but I've often said I just don't know how you do it, because just being through the looking glass for so long in Geneva, it does something to people. But the problems of the UN remain the same, and the problem is always that what you would set up would be a UN-like organization. But one thing I would say can be done is that people can be educated about what the UN is not. Okay, you have these votes, you have the endless resolutions against Israel and so on. Sure, okay. Just know that the game is rigged. The famous joke is that the UN should have a soccer team. And the response is, yeah, but who would they play? It's Israel, of course. It's been rigged like this for decades. In 1975, when the Zionism is Racism resolution was passed at the United Nations, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a great distinguished Democrat, gave that extraordinary speech of rebuttal. The motion was, among other things, put down by Idi Amin. And, Idi Amin apparently had the right to decide what racism was. A man who had the blood of more Ugandans on his hand than anyone else in recent memory. I once had a copy editor in an early book of mine say, when I mentioned Idi Amin, I think you've made a mistake here. You say that you describe Idi Amin as a wife eater. Surely there's a B missing. I said, oh no, sadly not. But, and when that resolution passed, the Zionism is Racism resolution, I mean, imagine what Idi Amin did to his country and his people. But the reception that night to celebrate the resolution passing was hosted by Kurt Waldheim of the SS. So my view is that since then, no one should take lessons in morality from the United Nations. But again, it's a question of particularly young people understanding that the UN is not what it pretends and claims to be. So when people say, the United Nations has ruled on this, I think you have to understand its edict should not be regarded as universal or indeed moral.
Why are they hyper-focused on Israel? What is the obsession? More resolutions against Israel than every country on earth put together, including North Korea, Fighters of Freedom in Venezuela, Russia, China. How does this even happen?
Well, it's several reasons. I mean, one is that the Organization of Islamic Conference is very important in the United Nations. It has dozens of countries at its beck and call, whereas Israel is the one Jewish state. Again, you've all seen the videos of people doing vox pops at campuses and so on, and asking students how many Jewish states are there, 1, 12, or 89, and they go. But I think it's like 26, a number you weren't even offered. Anyway, but of course, I mean, in simple numbers terms, Israel is vastly outnumbered at the United Nations. And you have the non-aligned countries. You have countries like South Africa that are easily bored. I mean, why did the South African government decide to do this? They didn't. The South African government can't keep the lights on in Johannesburg, okay? They have serious problems, serious problems. Does anyone really think they were suddenly spurred to moral outrage about the Gazans? Of course not. The regime in Tehran paid them, recruited them, and got them to do the job. And so they acted as a proxy, one of the many proxies of Tehran. And I think that for that reason and many others, Israel will be at a disadvantage. One other thing that has to be said is there's always there's a disconnect which the United Nations epitomizes, which is the disconnect between people you can speak to and who might listen and people who will never listen. Some of you have probably had this experience in your lives. You know, you can end up complaining most to the people nearest to you. You can end up treating harshest the people who are closest to you. Sometimes you're nice to strangers and not to the people around you. And in my view, the world's democracies have realized, you know, Israel does listen. It does care. It does not want to be accused of a horrific crime like genocide. The North Korean government does not care and will not listen. And that creates a total difference. I was at a meeting in the Knesset with the families of all of the children hostages and some representatives from the government and also some representatives from UNICEF. Now, UNICEF, as one of the parents pointed out, has one job, to look after kids. And UNICEF was silent on the abduction of Jewish children. Silent. And when the head of UNICEF was meant to finally come to Jerusalem, she called in sick. And I discovered during the meeting, although I didn't say it to the parents, that she was actually in Gaza. And the deputy head who she sent sat there in front of these, unimaginable, in front of these parents and took notes occasionally and expressed sorrow. And they'd done nothing. And one of the reasons why they'd done nothing was because they presumably knew Hamas doesn't give a damn about UNICEF. The Israeli government does. Governments of most developed democracies do. You think you're going to persuade Hamas to do anything they don't want to do unless you force them? This is one of the problems we've all got into in the democracies. We've got into this mad situation where we berate our friends and those who would want to kill us, we somehow keep out of the equation. I'm amazed by some of the things I hear from the West. There's a close enemy of mine in the UK who saw a part of the 47-minute footage and did it like a film review in his column. So I said, well, we don't actually see any women being raped in the video. What a pit of malevolence you have to be in. I'll give you some other videos and you can get your popcorn out. What sick people there are around. But one of the things that has stunned me, I have to say, among young populations in the West is a very, very straightforward one, which is the Nova Party. If that party had been going on in Britain or America or Canada, young people who would have been at it or your friends would have been at it. And you would have thought that in the international community, all those people who like to enjoy themselves, like to go to a party, would have some sympathy with the hundreds of young people who dreamt not just of dancing, but dreamt of the day they could dance with their Palestinian neighbors and who saw hell. And if I've been to several of the reunions of the survivors, and I mean, they are, even the most coping ones of them are wildly changed in a way that no amount of therapy can probably ever cure. And, you know, again, I'm just stunned by this very simple thing that always stuns me about the international reaction to Israel is, where is your empathy? Where is your damn empathy? I mean, I don't go into too many of the details, but one pretty hard day was the cars from the festival, which had blocked the road, you know, and where many people were killed and many were burned alive, were all collected in a site just down the road, and I was allowed access to it with my cameraman. And there were some remarkable young 19-year-old first-year IDF women helping out. But the task was being led by the amazing Orthodox Jews who do the collection of bodies, and they were cleaning the cars with a special device to make sure all the body parts were out, the blood and everything else. And there were just huge sacks of ash. And that was what had happened to these hundreds of young people. Now, how, on God's name, can any young person think that any of those people did anything wrong or that anything could have justified that? What do you have to have become? And all I can say is you have to have become somebody you should not ever want to be. I knew this would happen. I knew it would happen. I said to a friend on the 7th, they'll probably give us about 24 hours before the story is Israeli response to blah, 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 blah. I mean, usually when a war involving Gaza and Israel comes up, you hear about the war only because of the Israeli retaliation. The media doesn't tell you what happened that Israel is retaliating to. And that's perfectly normal. And in this conflict, it's been on amphetamines. I mean, they were talking about Israeli retaliation before the IDF had done anything. They were claiming there was a genocide in Gaza before the IDF were even in Gaza. They always do it, and the result of this is the appalling situation which Israel alone among the world's democracies finds itself in, which, and I said this before, but I'll say it again, it's the only country in the world that's never allowed to win a war. I personally think it is intolerable to be in a situation where every couple of years Israel is forced into another Gaza war, and every 15 to 20 years it's forced into another Lebanon war. No country should expect that or have to put up with it. That's why I say that the question with this is this the umpteenth Gaza war? Or is it the last? It seems, since the international community pretends that Israel has to abide by everything the international community says, very interesting what they choose not to abide by. Resolution 1701, that was meant to stop the amassing of Hezbollah munitions in the southern part of Lebanon, has been completely disobeyed by Hezbollah since 2006. Well, where is the international community on this? Are international resolutions binding or not? Are they in the case of this one or not? And I would say clearly not. The international community did not stop Hezbollah amassing something like 160,000 very high-level rockets in southern Lebanon. And so, again, there is always the asymmetry of Israel, the obsession with Israel fighting back. And I think that goes, by the way, very deep. There is a shallow version of it, which is just, politically active nincompoops. But there's a deep one as well, which is a very deep level of people who, I'll do it this way. Why do they say genocide? Why do they say genocide? Why do they say that Gaza is a concentration camp? Why do they say Gaza is the Warsaw Ghetto? Why do they say that Israel behaves like Hitler? Because either they want to wound and hurt Jews as deeply as possible and know what they're doing, or, and this is more of a psychological explanation, and again, this exists particularly in Europe, they want at some point to expiate their own guilt by saying that the Israelis behaved as badly. You see, if Israel behaves in a Nazi-like fashion, then everyone else can move on. And I think that one goes very deep. There's a great passage in a favorite novel of mine by Vasily Grossman, the great Russian journalist and author, who, in his magnificent Life and Fate, where Grossman describes his own eyewitness accounts of Stalingrad, everything from Stalingrad to Treblinka. He traversed the midnight of the 20th century. But slap bang in the middle of Life and Fate are 3 pages about the nature of anti-Semitism. And in my view, these pages should be much better known than they are. He says almost everything you need to say. He says anti-Semitism is something that you can find in the Academy of Sciences and in the games that children play in the schoolyard. But he says everywhere it tells you not about the Jews, but about the person making the accusation. He says, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this. You can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely, It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.